everything okay? You seem distant suddenly.
Yes, just thinking.
I thought everything in my life was on the right track. Sarah and I had been together for 3 years, and it felt like we were building something real, something that would last. We shared the same goals, the same vision for the future. I thought we were a team. Everything felt so perfectly aligned. But that was before she told me she wanted more. "I need to do this for myself," she said one evening, sitting across from me at our small dining table. Her eyes were filled with something I couldn't quite place. Determination, maybe? Or fear? It was hard to tell. But when she spoke, her words felt like a slap. I looked at her, trying to make sense of what she was saying. "What do you mean?" My voice was barely above a whisper, the panic rising in my chest. "We've been working toward this together, haven't we? Our plans, our dreams." She shifted in her seat, running a hand through her hair. "I know, but I've realized something. I can't keep putting my life on hold for both of us. I have my own ambitions, and I need to chase them." She paused, then added, "I'm leaving." Her words hit me like a freight train. Leaving? She was leaving? I couldn't understand it. I thought we were happy. We'd talked about everything, made plans. This wasn't supposed to happen. I blinked, trying to clear the fog in my head. "Sarah, what are you talking about? We were building something here. Together." My voice cracked a little at the end, the realization sinking in that she wasn't seeing it the same way. I thought we were on the same path. She avoided my gaze, her hands fidgeting nervously in her lap. "I thought so too, but I've changed, and I need to follow my own dreams. You've always been so supportive of mine, and I appreciate it, but this is something I have to do alone." The words were still hanging in the air, but I couldn't process them. My mind was racing, trying to piece together the life I thought we were building. But Sarah was already pulling away, emotionally, physically. She had already made up her mind. "You're really doing this?" I asked, the pain making it hard to breathe. "You're leaving me for your dream?" I couldn't even say it without feeling like a part of me was disappearing. She nodded, her eyes finally meeting mine. "I'm sorry. I thought it would be better this way. For both of us." I couldn't believe it. She was really going. She was leaving the life we'd planned, the future we'd talked about, just like that. She was leaving me behind. I didn't know how to handle it. The days after Sarah told me she was leaving were some of the darkest I'd ever experienced. I barely slept, barely ate. Everything felt hollow, like the life I had been living didn't exist anymore. The apartment we shared felt empty, even though I was still surrounded by her things, the photos of us on the walls, her clothes in the closet, the empty space where her laughter used to fill the silence. I kept thinking, maybe if I just tried harder, if I gave her more of what she wanted, I could bring her back. But deep down, I knew I couldn't force her to stay. She was chasing something, and it didn't include me. One night, I was sitting in the dark, staring at the empty space where Sarah's chair used to be. I could still hear her voice, feel her presence in the corners of my mind. It was like she was still there, even though she was gone. I reached for my phone to text her, to tell her how much I missed her, how much I still needed her. But I stopped myself. No. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to keep chasing her dreams. I'd spent so much time trying to be the supportive partner, the one who always put her goals ahead of mine. I had done everything for her, thinking that if I just gave enough, I'd keep her close. But it wasn't enough. She had left me. She had chosen her own path over everything we had. I slammed my phone down on the table, the frustration building inside me. For the first time since she left, I felt a spark of something different, something stronger than sadness. It was anger. But not the kind of anger I thought I would feel. It wasn't toward Sarah anymore. It was toward myself. How could I let myself get lost in someone else's dreams? How could I have put myself second for so long? The next day, I made a decision. I couldn't live in this self-pity anymore. If Sarah was going to chase her future, then I would chase mine. I wasn't going to wait around for her to change her mind, to come back to me. I had my own life to live. I had my own dreams. I wasn't going to be someone who existed just to support another person's ambitions. I wasn't going to let her leaving define me. I would rebuild. I would create the life I wanted, even if I had to do it alone. I picked up the phone again, not to text Sarah, but to call my old friend Jason. I need a change, I told him. I'm ready to do something new. He didn't question me. What are you thinking? I don't know yet, I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. But I'm going to find out. Sarah walked away, but I was still here. The life we had built was gone, but I was still breathing, still alive. That was all that mattered. I was going to make something of myself, something bigger than what I had before. And when I did, I'd remember that this moment, the pain and the heartbreak, was the catalyst. It was the moment I realized I couldn't just follow someone else's dreams anymore. I needed my own. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. The days felt like they stretched on forever after Sarah left. I had never imagined life without her in it. It wasn't just the loss of her presence, it was the loss of our shared future, the dreams we built together. I tried to keep myself busy, work, distractions, anything to avoid thinking about what had happened. But no matter how hard I tried, she was always there in the back of my mind. Every corner of the apartment, every small detail, reminded me of her. It was like she had left pieces of herself scattered everywhere. I kept going through the motions, pretending like everything was fine, but deep down, I knew I was barely holding it together. I spent my days working, long hours at the office, burying myself in spreadsheets and emails. It helped a little, kept my mind from wandering back to thoughts of Sarah, but the moment I'd get home, the emptiness would settle back in. The loneliness was suffocating. I would sit at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me, where she used to sit. I could still see her, her smile, the way she would laugh, the way she'd look at me with those eyes full of dreams and ambition. But that's the thing, isn't it? Her ambition was something she wanted more than anything else, more than the life we'd promised each other. She walked away from me without a second thought to chase something bigger, and I was left behind to pick up the pieces. I couldn't help but wonder how she was doing. Was she happier? Was she living the life she always wanted? I had no idea. The silence from her was deafening. Not a text, not a call. She had just gone. And I was left with a hole that seemed impossible to fill. I thought about calling her 100 times, asking her to come back, telling her I could change, that we could figure it out. But I never did. Every time I picked up the phone, I stopped myself. I realized something, she wasn't coming back. She had made her choice, and there was nothing I could do to change it. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. She wasn't thinking about me. She was living her life, and I was stuck in the past, clinging to the remnants of a future she had abandoned. It hurt. It hurt more than anything I had ever felt. I was drowning in memories, each one a sharp reminder of how easily she had walked away from everything we shared. How easily she had left me behind for the sake of her own dreams. I tried to distract myself, tried to focus on anything else, work, friends, even random hobbies. But nothing worked. At night, when the world quieted down, the thoughts of her would creep back in. Her face, her laugh, the way she would say my name in that soft, teasing voice. All of it was gone, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started noticing things I hadn't before, things I used to ignore when she was around. The silence of the apartment. The way everything felt hollow. It was like the walls themselves were mourning her absence. It was in one of those quiet moments, as I sat on the couch, staring at the TV without actually watching it, that it finally hit me. Sarah was gone, and she wasn't coming back. That was the truth. As much as I wanted to believe in some grand gesture, some way to win her back, the reality was that she had chosen to follow her dreams, and I wasn't a part of them anymore. It wasn't just the life we had together she left behind, it was me. And then something inside me stirred. Maybe it was the frustration. Maybe it was the hurt. Maybe it was the realization that I couldn't keep living in the shadow of what was lost. But I knew right then that I couldn't stay stuck. I couldn't keep letting her walk away with everything, my dreams, my hopes, my future. It wasn't fair. I had a life to live, too. I wasn't going to let her define me anymore. I wasn't going to let her abandonment be the end of my story. It was time for me to build my own future, one that didn't depend on her dreams. I didn't know exactly what that future looked like, but I knew it had to be something I created on my own terms. The next day, I decided to take action. I didn't have a clear plan, but I couldn't just keep waiting around for life to start again. I started with the basics, getting my life back on track, one small step at a time. I signed up for a new project at work, something that would push me out of my comfort zone. I reached out to old friends I hadn't spoken to in a while, just to reconnect. Anything to fill the void, to remind myself that I was still here, still capable of moving forward. I even started exercising again. I hadn't realized how much I'd neglected myself until now. My routine had fallen apart with Sarah's departure, and I needed to regain control of something, anything. I needed to feel like I was building something, even if it was just myself. Days turned into weeks, and I could feel the shift happening within me. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the loneliness crept back in, when the pain of Sarah's absence hit me like a ton of bricks. But I was starting to feel a glimmer of something else too, something that hadn't been there for a long time, hope. I was rebuilding. I wasn't sure where it would lead, but I was determined to keep moving forward. Sarah's dreams were hers, but I had my own. I wasn't going to let the hurt define me anymore. I was going to create a future, one that didn't depend on anyone else's choices but mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control again. It wasn't the life I had envisioned, but it was a life I could make my own. And that was enough for now. The months following Sarah's departure were a blur of numbness and self-pity. I told myself I was fine. I told myself I just needed time to heal, that eventually, the pain would fade and life would get back to normal. But the truth was, I was stuck. I had been stuck in the same routine for far too long. Every day felt like a replay of the last, each one passing without any real change. I was going through the motions, but I wasn't truly living. I spent my days at work, but my mind was always elsewhere. At night, I'd sit in the apartment we used to share, feeling the weight of the emptiness around me. The silence felt like a constant reminder of what I'd lost. The once vibrant life we had together had vanished, and I was left trying to figure out how to move forward. I kept looking at the future as something that had been stolen from me, as if my dreams were now impossible to reach. And maybe I had believed that for a while. Maybe I thought the life I wanted couldn't exist without Sarah in it. But there was a moment, something snapped inside me one night. It was like a switch had been flipped. I was sitting on the couch, staring out the window at the city lights, when the realization hit me. Nothing was going to change unless I made it change. No one else was going to fix this for me. Sarah had chosen her path, and I couldn't keep wasting my time clinging to a past that no longer existed. I couldn't keep chasing someone who had thrown me away. If I wanted a future, I had to build it on my own. It felt like a wave of clarity washed over me in that moment. I wasn't the same person anymore. I didn't need to be. I'd spent months grieving the loss of her, the loss of our future together, but I realized I wasn't going to get anywhere by living in that grief. I had been so focused on what I had lost that I hadn't noticed what I still had, the ability to change, to take control of my life again. I could still build something. I could still make something of myself, even if Sarah wasn't a part of it. The next day, I woke up with a new sense of purpose. I wasn't going to wallow anymore. I started by hitting the gym again, something I had let slip during those months of emotional turmoil. I wasn't doing it to impress anyone. I wasn't doing it to get her back. I was doing it for me. I needed to feel strong again, physically and mentally. Every rep, every drop of sweat, felt like I was shedding the last bits of self-doubt. I was starting to feel like myself again. I began diving into my career, too. I reached out to old contacts, started networking, and pushed myself to take on new projects at work. I wasn't waiting for opportunities to come to me. I was going to create my own. And slowly, things started to shift. I began to feel the spark of excitement again, something I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't the life I had imagined with Sarah, but it was a life I could build on my own. And that was enough. I started taking on side projects, learning new skills, and expanding my network. I knew I was ready for more, but I wasn't sure what it was yet. I could feel myself changing, but the truth was, I wasn't sure where this new path would lead. I had let go of the future I had envisioned with Sarah, but I was starting to build a future I could call my own. The turning point came about a month after I made that decision. I had been grinding hard, taking every opportunity that came my way, when I got an email that changed everything. It was an offer, a job offer from a company I had admired for years. It was more than I could have imagined at this stage. The salary was better, the position more influential, and the opportunities to grow were endless. But it wasn't just about the job. It was the realization that this was my chance to finally live the life I'd always dreamed of, one that wasn't tied to anyone else's expectations, not even Sarah's. I stared at the email for a long time before I clicked accept. I couldn't believe it at first. My mind was racing. I had worked so hard to get to this point, and now I had the chance to step into the future I'd always imagined. The future wasn't defined by Sarah, by the life we'd built, or by the plans we'd made together. It was mine. It was all mine. And it was up to me to make it happen. I sat there for a long time after I clicked that button. It felt like a weight had lifted off my chest. It wasn't just the job offer, it was the realization that I had taken control. I had chosen this path, and no one was going to stop me. Not Sarah, not anyone. This was my future, and I wasn't going to wait for anyone else to give it to me. The next few weeks were a blur. I threw myself into the new job, pushing myself to exceed expectations and prove I belonged there. It wasn't easy, but nothing worth having ever was. There were days when I wanted to give up, days when I felt like I was too far behind, but I reminded myself of why I was doing this. I was doing this for me. I wasn't chasing Sarah's dreams anymore. I was chasing my own. One evening, I walked home from the office, my mind full of new ideas and goals. As I passed the cafe we used to go to, I couldn't help but pause for a moment. The memories of Sarah flooded my mind, of us laughing over coffee, of the way she would look at me with so much love in her eyes. But now, the memories felt distant. It wasn't sadness that filled me anymore. It was something else, something closer to peace. I had let go. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant accepting what had happened and finding my way forward. Sarah's life was hers to live, and mine was mine. The future was no longer about what we could have had together. It was about what I could build on my own. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face whatever came next. The job was just the beginning. I knew that when I signed on, but I didn't fully grasp how much it would change me until I dove in headfirst. Every day, I woke up with a purpose. I didn't just go through the motions anymore, I made myself an active participant in my own life. The work was hard, but it felt good. It felt real. I threw myself into everything, learning new systems, attending meetings, and pushing myself in ways I hadn't in a long time. I made connections with people who were far more successful than I had ever imagined. It was exciting and terrifying all at once, but there was a hunger inside me now, a need to prove to myself that I could do this. At first, I felt like a small fish in a big pond, but I refused to stay small. I took every opportunity one could, volunteered for projects, and always pushed to be a part of conversations. Slowly, over time, people started to take notice. I wasn't just the new guy anymore. I was becoming a part of the team, and that felt like something I hadn't experienced in a long time, like I actually mattered. There was a rush to it. The feeling of making progress, of being in control again, of finally chasing something that wasn't defined by Sarah or the past. Every new task, every new connection I made, added another brick to the foundation I was building for myself. I didn't need anyone else's approval anymore. I was building my life. And it felt incredible. But even as I made progress, even as I started to carve out a future I could be proud of, there was always this nagging thought in the back of my mind. Sarah. I couldn't help but wonder if she ever thought about me. Did she look back on the life we had and feel any regret? Did she ever wonder if I was doing okay, if I had moved on? Sometimes, late at night, when I was alone in my apartment after a long day, I'd catch myself wondering what could have been. What would she think if she saw me now, if she saw how far I'd come without her? It wasn't that I wanted her back. I had made my peace with the fact that we weren't meant to be together anymore. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she might still be part of my future somehow. It didn't help that I saw her everywhere in the corners of my mind. The places we used to go, the things we used to do, they were all reminders of what I had lost. I could still hear her laugh in my head, could still feel her hand in mine when I walked through the streets we used to walk together. The closer I got to achieving everything I had wanted, the further she seemed to drift away from me. It was almost like she had never been a part of my world, and that reality stung a little more each day. The more I succeeded, the more I found myself asking these questions. What would she think of me now? Would she be proud of what I had accomplished? Would she be happy to see me moving on, or would she feel regret for walking away? I tried not to dwell on it, but I couldn't help it. Sometimes, I'd wonder if the life I was building was the one she would have wanted for us, if she had stayed. Was I becoming the person I was meant to be, or was I just filling the hole she left behind with work and success? Was this all just to prove something to her, or was I truly doing this for myself? One afternoon, after a particularly successful presentation to a new client, I stepped out of the conference room to catch my breath. I stood in the hallway, watching people rush past me, each of them lost in their own world. It was in that moment that I realized something. This wasn't about Sarah anymore. This was about me. I had spent so long holding on to the idea of what could have been with her that I hadn't allowed myself to fully accept the future I was creating. It wasn't just Sarah who had walked away from me, it was the version of myself who was still stuck in the past, still chasing a future that wasn't mine. I had to let go. I had to stop wondering what Sarah would think. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I was moving forward, that I was building something real. The life I had now was mine to create, and it didn't need her approval. I didn't need to prove anything to her. That night, as I sat in my apartment, I looked around at the space I had carved out for myself. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The furniture was still sparse, the walls bare, but it felt more like home than anything I had shared with Sarah. It was my own space, a reflection of everything I was becoming. And for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of the past pressing down on me. I was free. I thought about Sarah, about the life we had. It was hard to forget. But I had to accept it was over. She had her path, and I had mine. The life I was building wasn't dependent on her anymore. It was my own, something I had created with my own hands. I closed my eyes and breathed in deeply. The weight of the past was lifting. Slowly, but surely, I was starting to feel like myself again. I wasn't the man I had been when she left me. I was someone new, someone who could stand on his own, who could thrive without relying on anyone else's dreams but his own. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of it. I had just started to feel like I was finally in control of my life when it happened. It was a regular Tuesday evening, one of those networking events I had been attending for months now, just another opportunity to make connections, to keep pushing myself forward. The drinks were flowing, people were laughing, and I was right in the middle of a conversation about a new project I was excited about. It was all going smoothly, just as it always did now. But then, I saw her. My heart stopped for a moment, and I swear, time slowed down as my eyes landed on her. There she was, standing across the room. Sarah. She hadn't changed at all. She was just as beautiful as I remembered. Her hair was longer now, a few more strands of silver, but she was still the same. Her smile, the one that used to be reserved just for me, was there too, but it didn't reach her eyes the way it used to. She was dressed in a sleek, professional outfit that screamed confidence, but her stance was more hesitant than I remembered. I took a breath and tried to steady myself. I hadn't seen her in over a year, and up until that moment, I had convinced myself I had moved on. That I wasn't still harboring feelings for the woman who had left me behind. But seeing her standing there, looking at me, it brought back memories I had long buried. The good and the bad. The life we could have had. The life she chose to walk away from. I watched as her eyes scanned the room, and then they landed on me. For a brief second, there was a flicker of recognition, followed by a split-second hesitation. She didn't look away. Instead, she made her way toward me, pushing through the crowd of people like a magnet pulling toward its source. James? Her voice was soft, almost like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to speak my name anymore. I swallowed hard and forced myself to smile, keeping my composure. Sarah, it's been a while. She stood in front of me, a bit stiff but trying to look casual. Her eyes quickly scanned me, taking in my appearance, my suit, my success. I could feel her assessment without her saying a word. The silence between us felt heavy, but I wasn't going to be the one to fill it first. "How have you been?" she asked, though the question didn't feel genuine. I could hear it in her voice, the faint trace of curiosity, but not the concern I would have expected from someone who cared about me. No, this question wasn't about my well-being. It was about gauging where I stood in the world she had walked away from. "I'm doing well," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Busy, you know? But that's a good thing. Lots of projects coming up. I'm happy with the direction things are going." There it was again, the look in her eyes. The one I couldn't quite place at first, but now it was clearer than ever. It was regret. Not the kind of regret that comes from a broken heart, but the regret of someone who had made a choice and then realized, perhaps too late, that it wasn't the right one. She had left me behind for a dream that was hers alone, and now she was standing in front of me, probably wishing she could undo the past. Her mouth opened, but no words came out for a moment. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was struggling with what to say next, what to do with this encounter. She wasn't sure how to face me, not with the life I had built without her. "Look at you," she finally said, a slight laugh escaping her. "I can't believe how much you've changed. You look great." I didn't reply immediately. She didn't need me to, and I didn't need to hear it. I didn't need her validation anymore. That's when I realized it, completely and fully. I had stopped being the man who wanted to chase after her approval, to prove that I was enough for her. "I'm happy you're doing well," I said. "It's good to see you, Sarah." "Really?" The words felt polite but distant, and I was okay with that. "You look like you've been busy too. Things seem to be going well for you." Her eyes softened, but there was an unmistakable distance now. She was realizing that I wasn't the same person she had walked away from. That James, the one who had bent over backward for her, the one who had been willing to follow her dreams as his own, was gone. And now, I was someone else. Someone stronger. Someone who didn't need her to define his worth. "You've really made something of yourself," she said quietly, her gaze lingering on me for a moment longer than necessary. "I didn't think I'd see you like this. You've really turned everything around." I shrugged, trying to play it off, but inside, I felt the weight of her words. The truth was, I had made something of myself, but it hadn't been for her. It hadn't been because of her. It had been for me. Every success I'd achieved, every door I'd opened, was because I had decided to stop chasing her dreams. I had chosen to chase my own. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady, "it wasn't easy, but I'm proud of where I'm at now." She looked away, her expression faltering for a moment. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, something like pain, but it quickly vanished, replaced by a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm glad you're doing well." "Really, I am." I nodded. "Thanks. I'm sure you're doing great too." We stood there for a moment in awkward silence, both of us unsure of how to proceed. I realized then that this encounter had been the final test. I had wondered, in the quiet moments, if I would still feel the same pull toward her, the same desire to make things right. But standing here, in front of her, I knew the answer. I didn't need her anymore. I didn't need her approval, her validation. I had built something on my own, and that was enough. "Well," I said, breaking the silence, "it was good to see you, Sarah. Take care of yourself." She nodded slowly. "You too, James. Good luck with everything." As she walked away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. This was it. The chapter of Sarah and me was officially closed. I watched her disappear into the crowd, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel a pang of longing or regret. I was okay. I was better than okay. I didn't expect it to be easy. Seeing Sarah again stirred up old emotions I thought I had buried. But after that brief encounter at the networking event, something inside me clicked. I wasn't the same person anymore. I wasn't the guy who would drop everything for her, the guy who'd wait around hoping she'd come back. She had made her choice, and now I had to live with mine. And my choice? I was done chasing the past. I threw myself into my work even more, pushing myself further, finding new goals to chase. I'd been so focused on rebuilding myself, on showing the world, and myself, that I was more than the guy Sarah left behind. Every success, every new achievement, felt like a small victory. I didn't need her to see me now. I didn't need anyone's validation. I was building my life, and it felt damn good. Weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, I grew more confident. I'd started working on a big project, something I knew could take me to the next level in my career. It required late nights, sacrifices, and more work than I thought I had the energy for, but I did it. And it paid off. The project was a success, and suddenly, people started recognizing my name in the industry. It was like everything I had worked for was finally falling into place. But no matter how much I achieved, there was still something I couldn't shake. Every so often, I'd find myself wondering what Sarah was doing, if she was ever thinking about me. I didn't want to admit it, but sometimes I still thought about what we could have had. The dream of us, building a future together, was still somewhere in the back of my mind. But now, I saw that dream for what it really was, a version of myself that no longer existed. I wasn't the same person who had chased after her dreams. I wasn't even the same person I had been when she left. I had moved on, and I was finally living the life I had always wanted, just not with her. One night, I sat on the balcony of my penthouse apartment, staring out at the city skyline. The lights below twinkled like stars in a sky that never went dark. I hadn't expected to be here, not this soon. But there I was, standing in a place I had once only dreamed about, alone, but at peace. The apartment was everything I had wanted, sleek, modern, and completely mine. I had furnished it with the things I liked, surrounded myself with objects that inspired me, things that felt like a reflection of who I had become. I was no longer the guy who had settled for a life that wasn't mine. This life, I had built on my own terms. It felt real, it felt solid, and it was mine. I leaned against the railing, looking out at the city below. The sounds of traffic, distant conversations, and the hum of the city almost felt comforting. The world was still turning, and so was I. My life, my future, was unfolding before me, and I could finally see it clearly. There was no more waiting. No more wondering what could have been. I thought about Sarah, about the version of the future we had once dreamed up together. It wasn't a perfect dream, but it had been ours. And now, that dream was gone. It had died when she walked away, when she chose her ambitions over everything we had built. And even though I couldn't help but feel that small pang of sadness at the life we would never have, I also felt something stronger, peace. The future I had now wasn't just a replacement for that dream, it was better. It was real, it was mine, and it was everything I wanted. I had built this life from the ground up, piece by piece, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. Not Sarah, not anyone. This was my future, and I was living it. As I sat there, watching the city lights flicker below me, I couldn't help but smile. I had done it. I had made it. The life Sarah and I had dreamed of was no longer just a distant memory. It was a life I had built, one that was better than I had ever imagined. And I did it on my own. I thought about Sarah one last time. I wondered where she was, what she was doing. I wondered if she was happy, if she ever looked back and thought about what we could have had. But I realized, as I sat in that quiet moment, that I didn't need those answers. I didn't need her approval anymore. The future I had now was mine, and that was enough. I stood up from the balcony, a sense of finality settling in. I wasn't the man I used to be. I wasn't the man who let someone else dictate his future. I had taken control of my life. I had created a future that didn't depend on anyone else's choices. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was at peace. I was finally the person I was meant to be, the person I had always been capable of becoming. And that was worth everything. I turned away from the balcony, a sense of fulfillment washing over me. I had everything I needed to move forward. My future was mine to shape, and I wasn't afraid of it. I had built this life on my own, and it was more than enough. Time had a way of healing, of shifting perspectives, of making the impossible feel like just another part of the past. It wasn't an immediate transformation, not some magical epiphany that happened overnight. But the more I lived in this new life I had created, the more I realized that it was exactly what I had always wanted. I wasn't living in the shadow of someone else's dream anymore. I wasn't chasing after what we could have been, or what Sarah thought was best for me. I had built this life, my life. And it was everything I had dreamed of, only better. It wasn't about the big wins, the career milestones, or even the fancy apartment. It was about me, the man I had become. The man who had the strength to stand alone, to carve out a future that wasn't dependent on anyone else's approval, especially not hers. I spent days reflecting on how far I had come, on everything I had achieved, and it made me realize how much I had grown. I had stopped living in the past, stopped holding on to the idea of a future that didn't exist anymore. I wasn't searching for something or someone to complete me. I had already completed myself. I had everything I needed to be happy, to be whole. I'd been so focused on Sarah, on what we could have had, for so long. But now, as time went on, she seemed more and more like a distant memory. At first, I would catch myself thinking about her, wondering where she was, what she was doing. But those moments had become less frequent. The emptiness she left in me had been filled with purpose, with ambition, with my own goals. I didn't need her to validate me anymore. The funny thing was, I hadn't even realized how much I had changed until I looked back and saw the person I used to be. The guy who was always second-guessing himself, who lived in the shadow of someone else's dreams. Now, I was the one forging my path, the one setting my own course. I didn't look back anymore. Sarah wasn't part of my life anymore, and I had stopped wondering what she thought. I had wished her well, and I meant it. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't haunted by the memories of what we once had. I was just me. And that was enough. There was a moment, just a few weeks ago, when I realized how far I'd come. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was sitting in my favorite cafe, a book in hand, sipping my coffee. It was the same cafe Sarah and I used to frequent, back when we first started dating. It used to sting, sitting here without her, remembering how we would talk about everything, our hopes, our future. But that day, as I sat there alone, I didn't feel the weight of the past anymore. The table was still the same, the atmosphere was still familiar, but the memories didn't hurt. They just felt like pieces of a story that had already been told. I had my own story now. And it was far better than the one I thought I was supposed to live. I looked out the window, watching people walk by, lost in their own little worlds. I wondered what the future held. I didn't know. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't chasing anything. I was just living in the moment, building my life. The phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a text from a colleague, asking if I had finished reviewing a report I'd been working on. I smiled as I tapped out a quick reply, and then, for a split second, I glanced at the contacts list. I hadn't heard from Sarah in months. I hadn't even thought about reaching out. It wasn't like I was holding on to a grudge. I just didn't need to anymore. The idea of calling her seemed almost foreign now. It was as if the chapter had closed, and no one was pushing me to reopen it. I could see Sarah in my mind, the version of her I still held on to, the way she looked when she was unsure of her choices, the way she once believed that chasing her dreams meant leaving me behind. But that wasn't who I was anymore. That wasn't the life I had built. I wasn't sitting around waiting for her to realize what she lost. I had realized it long ago. And I had moved on. I spent the next few weeks focusing entirely on my work, on expanding my horizons. I took on a leadership role in a major project at work, one that was going to take everything I had, but I was ready for it. I threw myself into it, staying late in the office, brainstorming ideas, collaborating with new colleagues, pushing myself to be better every single day. The team was amazing, and I was finally the leader I had always dreamed of being. One evening, after wrapping up a long day at work, I stood at my office window, looking out over the city. The lights below twinkled in the distance, and I couldn't help but smile. I had everything I had ever wanted, and none of it had anything to do with Sarah. It wasn't that I didn't care about her anymore. It was that I realized I could be complete without her. I had built a life for myself, one I was proud of. As I stood there, looking at the city stretching out before me, I realized something. Sarah had left me, yes. But in doing so, she had unintentionally given me the space to become the person I was always meant to be. I had the freedom to make my own choices, to create my own future, to pursue my own happiness. She wasn't a part of my life anymore, and I didn't need her to be. I was the man I had always wanted to be. And that man didn't need anyone else to complete him. I smiled to myself, turning away from the window. The future was waiting, and I was ready for it. I didn't know what it would bring, but I knew it was mine. And that was enough. As I sat in my apartment that evening, looking out at the city lights below, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had brought me here. The journey wasn't easy, and it hadn't been without its share of pain. Sarah's departure had torn me apart at the time, leaving a hole in my heart that I thought would never heal. I spent months trying to put the pieces back together, but it felt like I was rebuilding a house on a cracked foundation. Yet, here I was, looking at the life I had created for myself, standing at the edge of a future I had forged with my own hands. I couldn't deny the pain Sarah's absence had caused me, but I also couldn't deny that the person I had become was a stronger, more independent version of myself. I had spent so long wondering if I could be happy again without her, but now, I realized I didn't just survive, I thrived. I didn't need her to succeed. I didn't need anyone but myself. The life I had built was better than what I could have ever imagined with her. I was living a life I had chosen. One that was my own. And, in that moment, I understood something that had taken me so long to grasp. The dreams I once shared with Sarah, the future we had planned together, were no longer mine to chase. I had walked a different path, and it had led me to a place where I no longer needed to look back. I spent the next few days looking at my life through a different lens. The apartment was still the same, but everything felt different now. I was no longer haunted by memories of the past. Sarah's absence wasn't a painful gap in my life anymore. It was a natural part of my journey. I could almost smile at the fact that I had been so consumed by the idea of her leaving me. In truth, her departure was the catalyst for the person I had become, the person I was proud of today. As I moved through my day-to-day, the idea of Sarah didn't linger in the back of my mind like it used to. I had grown to accept that the life we could have had together was never meant to be. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the version of me who had chased her dreams was long gone. The man standing here today, looking at the life he had created, was someone new. A version of myself I could be proud of. It wasn't bitterness I felt anymore when I thought about Sarah. It wasn't even anger. I had no hatred toward her. But there was a deep understanding that the path she had chosen was her own, and the one I walked now was mine. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. And I had to let go of the life we thought we would share, because in doing so, I had discovered a life that was far greater than I ever imagined. One morning, I woke up to the sound of the city coming to life. I stretched, feeling the familiar sense of peace that had settled over me. It wasn't the absence of struggle or challenges, but the certainty that I was living the life I had created, one that was completely mine. The weight of past regrets no longer clung to me. I was free to move forward. I stood at the window, watching the sun break through the horizon, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the weight of Sarah's ghost lingering in the back of my mind. It had been months since I'd thought about reaching out, and now, I realized that I didn't need to. The past was a chapter that had closed, and I was moving on to the next. In that moment, I understood something else too. The future I had dreamed of with Sarah was gone, but I had something even better now, my own future, one that I had crafted with every choice, every decision, and every step I had taken since she left. The chapter on Sarah was officially closed, and I felt no sadness, no longing. It was just done. She had played her role in my life, and now it was time for me to continue the story without her. I left my apartment that day with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. I had built something real for myself, something I was proud of. The man I was now was unrecognizable to the person I had been when Sarah left. And as I stepped into the world, I no longer felt like I was waiting for something to happen. I was creating it. Every step forward, every new opportunity, was a part of the life I had chosen. The life I had earned. I didn't know what the future held, but I wasn't afraid of it. I was ready. Because I had already started living it.